Friday kind of story, because if you look at things like department store sales, sporting goods, those types of doorbuster type of retailers, those were basically the hardest folks hit in the composition of sales. And when we look at things like internet sales, of course, that was strong. Another factor here that's weighing on things, gas prices have been stubbornly high. Not that they're really all that high overall, but normally in the back half of the year, gas prices come down pretty swiftly, and that provides a little bit of a dividend for consumers that find a little bit extra pocket change that they can spend on discretionary items. That hasn't happened this year. Gas prices are coming down, but not the way they normally do, and so that's just a little bit, one more headache to contemplate.
Just want to get you back to a trade, since that really is the story that has dominated markets throughout the year, throughout the past 2 years. I'm wondering, when you said it's sort of the difference between whether or not the U.S. economy will go gangbusters or not, which segments of the economy stand to gain the most steam if we do get some kind of trade deal, albeit one that seems on its surface as more of a truce, stop the clock, and get phase 2 in the works? Sure.
So we can look at the direct impact, right? If China agrees on paper to a hard figure of we will buy X amount of certain agricultural products, probably soybean, maybe other categories as well, then you can directly translate that through into the major producers of those agricultural products. So that's the direct impact. But more broadly, I think there will be more of a confidence impact that reinvigorates business investment spending. And so it's not that we should say, okay, the direct impact goes straight to the exporters. That's not necessarily even going to be the case. It's more this sense of businesses have been perplexed and terrified by the ongoing changes in the global trade landscape. And so they have been sitting on cash, not deploying capital, not making big investments into hard private infrastructure, whether it's CapEx or structures or factories, et cetera, et cetera. They're watching and waiting to see how the trade war pans out. So if it looks like we have hit the high water mark and we're moving in a more favorable direction next year, then they would be more willing to deploy capital. And so business investment spending could be the real winner, which it has, as I mentioned, consumers are the only game in town at the moment. If suddenly we have more diversified growth, that should mean faster overall growth as well.
Yeah, and actually non-financial business debt has exceeded consumer debt, household debt in the United States for the first time in decades, right?
Yes.
I just saw that statistic. So there's a question of whether they can actually start using some of the money they're borrowing to go out there. Kara Kadana, chief U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics, joining us here in our Interactive Broker Studios. I'm so glad that you could join us with that insight. And also, as you were speaking, I realized that terrified is a great word.
Oh, terrified.
Yes, because it's terrified.
Okay,
it's
there you
very
go. Fun
punny
play.
and wonderful. And I'm going to just move right on. Taking a look, I'm just hearing from Rich in the control room, it is the nerd in me. It is absolutely the nerd in me. I'm looking right now, the NASDAQ up 0.2%. The S&P also trying to climb positive, trying to digest all of these headlines. On Friday the 13th, we have Boris Johnson slated to speak. We have the Chinese negotiators expected to speak. And we have economic data. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. It's not the...
You know it's out there somewhere, but you just keep missing out. I'm talking about your dream job. Now it's easier to find and land that perfect role with the LinkedIn app. Download it now and you'll have millions of opportunities in your pocket. LinkedIn has more openings than applicants. Build connections, keep in touch, and be the first to hear about new jobs. Don't miss out. Get your next big break and land your perfect job. Download the free LinkedIn app today.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Are we on the brink of a more serious downturn?
I've always thought of the municipal bond market as a little bit of a safe haven.
Banks are going to have to start paying their depositors more.
Are we still in that mode where we're buying the dips?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Cash, if you're looking at treasury bills, provides a higher return than stocks and bonds here in the U.S.
If your consumer is a woman, you're more likely to be a growth company.
Longer-term interest rates can go down, even with short-term interest rates still going up a little bit.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Lisa Abramowitz here, Paul Sweeney off. If to call this a news dump Friday would be an understatement. We're having a lot of conflicting headlines on whether the U.S. and China have agreed on a trade deal. We are awaiting comments from the Chinese trade negotiators. Plus, Boris Johnson with a decisive, crushing victory in the UK elections. We're going to possibly hear from him within the next minute or so. And then, of course, we have the impeachment vote going on in the House of Representatives. All this on this Friday the 13th. Right now, though, let's get a check on how markets are taking it with Karen Moscow. Karen.
All right, Lisa, thank you. And conflicting reports indeed, including President Trump tweeting and disputing reports that the U.S. is prepared to partially roll back existing tariffs. The S&P 500 is now little change. It's at 3169. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up about 0.1%, now up 22 points at 28,154. And the NASDAQ up almost 0.2% or 13 points to 8730. The 10-year Treasury up 9/30 seconds, yield 1.85%. Yield on the 2-year 1.61%. NYMEX crude oil up 0.6% or 38 cents at 59.56 a barrel, and COMEX gold up 0.3% or $4.20 at 14.7620 an ounce. The euro 1.1159 against the dollar. The yen now at 109.39. U.S. retail sales missing forecast, calling for an acceleration in November. The value of overall sales climbed 0.2% after an upwardly revised 0.4% increase the prior month. And Deutsche Bank is considering deep cuts to bonuses for this year as Chief Executive Christian Saving seeks to eliminate billions of euros of costs in a radical restructuring. Sources tell Bloomberg Germany's largest lender may reduce discretionary compensation by as much as 20%. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa.
Karen, thank you so much. I do want to tell you that the Chinese news conference has begun with negotiators starting to talk about their side of the trade negotiations. China did say that the first phase of trade negotiations has a major achievement. So it does seem like we are maybe getting some details, and we will bring them to you as we get them. Meanwhile, imminently, Boris Johnson is expected to speak after his victory in the UK election, meaning that the UK will most likely leave the European Union come next month. Markets trying to digest all of this and figure out where to go from here. And that is going to be the question Mike Regan is going to answer. Mike Regan is senior editor and lead blogger for Markets Live. Mike, we're seeing now a pop in markets as they digest the headlines from the China press conference, with now the NASDAQ whipsawing back up to 0.5% gain. What's the sort of tipping point here to actually cause people to make a trade?
Well, I think the big news, obviously this Chinese press conference is a major surprise. It's turning out to be the biggest event of the week for traders. So we'll have to see all the news that comes out of that. But as you pointed out, those initial comments about a major achievement really are boosting the market here. I think, a lot of optimism was already priced in on this. So it'll be curious to see how much further we go.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate some of the headlines coming out of that Chinese press conference. They said that that the first phase of trade talks have achieved a major achievement, and they said also that the first that China says that the U.S. has agreed to remove extra tariffs in phases, so confirming some reports there. Also, China saying that they have reached an agreement on a text with the United States, and China also saying that an agreement is consistent with China's goal of reform. All of this coming out of that press conference, and people have been much waiting for this. Remember, it is 11 p.m. local time in Beijing that they are discussing this after going over what had been agreed on and how they wanted to message it. But again, we are seeing the Chinese agree to, or at least confirm, that there has been some agreement, and stocks are rallying on that, with the Nasdaq up 0.5%, the S&P up 0.4%, the Dow also up nearly 0.5%. How important, Mike Regan, are the details here? Because right now people are expecting it to be pretty much a return to where we were perhaps in 2017.
Well, I think the most important thing when looking at the very near term is the fact that this next batch of tariffs, which would have been tariffs on all of the remaining imports from China, there was a threat that they would be tariffed as of Sunday. So first and primarily, those are taken off the table, and I think that alone is enough for the market to breathe a sigh of relief. But you're right, as far as how much more we get, we really need to see the details.
Mike Regan, thank you so much for being with us. Mike Regan, senior editor and lead blogger for Markets Live. We do have a translation of that press conference in China. Let's take a listen.
A sound environment for normal economic trade and investment activities. The two sides have agreed to complete as quickly as possible legal review, translation and authentication and other necessary procedures, and also work out the specific arrangements for the official signing of the agreement through consultation. After the signing of the agreement, it is our hope that the two sides will abide by the agreement and endeavor to deliver on the relevant provisions of the Phase 1 agreement, do more things that are conducive to the growth of bilateral economic and trade relations and global economic and financial stability, and contribute to world peace and prosperity together. Thank you. Thank you. We will now open the floor to questions. Please identify your media affiliation before asking your questions.
To China's deputy head of trade negotiations discuss what has been agreed upon. They did agree that China is saying that the U.S. has agreed to remove tariffs on Chinese goods in phases. They also say that there has been an agreement reached in text. Boris Johnson now speaking after his decisive victory in the UK election. Let's listen to him.
Your trust and to deliver on your priorities with a parliament that works for you. And then I want to speak also to those who did not vote for us or for me, and who wanted and perhaps still want to remain in the EU. And I want you to know that we in this one nation Conservative government will never ignore your good and positive feelings of warmth and sympathy towards the other nations of Europe. Because now is the moment, precisely as we leave the EU, to let those natural feelings find renewed expression in building a new partnership, which is one of the great projects for next year. And as we work together with the EU, as friends and sovereign equals, in tackling climate change and terrorism, in building academic and scientific cooperation, redoubling our trading relationship, I frankly urge everyone on either side of what are, after 3.5 years, after all, an increasingly arid argument, I urge everyone to find closure and to let the healing begin. Because I believe, in fact I know, because I've heard it loud and clear from every corner of the country, that the overwhelming priority of the British people now is that we should focus above all on the NHS. That simple and beautiful idea that represents the best of our country, with the biggest ever cash boost, 50,000 more nurses, 40 new hospitals, as well as providing better schools, safer streets. And in the next few weeks and months, we will be bringing forward proposals to transform this country with better infrastructure, better education, better technology. And if you ask yourselves, what is this new government going to do? What is he going to do with his extraordinary majority? I will tell you that is what we are going to do. We are going to unite and level up.
We have been listening to Boris Johnson speaking after his decisive victory. Meanwhile, the news dump really does continue because not only do we have Boris Johnson and the Chinese negotiators continue to talk, but the House Judiciary Panel has approved Trump's abuse of power article. So basically confirming impeachment. Nathan Hager is down in our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. and has been following that. Can you give us what we know so far, Nathan?
Well, the House Judiciary Committee, as expected on a party line vote, has approved the first of two articles of impeachment against President Trump. As you mentioned, the first is for abuse of power related to the pressure campaign on Ukraine to investigate the president's political rival. Up next, the panel is voting on the second article of impeachment that accuses the president of obstructing the congressional investigation of the Ukraine matter. But as you say, the first article of impeachment has been approved by this committee. It will go to the full House. And if, as expected, it does advance there, Bloomberg's Kathleen Hunter reports things could get interesting.
Nancy Pelosi, the speaker, isn't going to be whipping that vote. And so I think the key question there is which Democrats, how many of them actually defect from the party and don't support the impeachment articles.
And again, the red headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal, Trump impeachment advances as a historic vote in the House Judiciary Committee sends the case to the full House. And a vote there is expected as soon as Wednesday, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Nathan Hager, on that update with the Trump impeachment advancing with a historic vote, sending the case to the House. Meanwhile, the dueling press conferences continue with Boris Johnson talking after his decisive victory. And over in Beijing, we are hearing from China's top deputy negotiator about what the U.S. has agreed to. U.S. stocks rallying, the S&P up 0.4%, NASDAQ up 0.6%, as China says that there has been an agreement on the text. There has been a major progress made, as well as that the U.S. has agreed to roll back tariffs in phases, is coming from the Chinese negotiator speaking in Beijing. Michael Regan still with us. Mike Regan, senior editor and lead blogger for Markets Live. I'm trying to get a sense of how markets are parsing through this text. The confirmation from Chinese authorities does seem to be pretty concrete in terms of some sort of agreement, pushing away some of the rumors and some of the headlines saying that there really hadn't been some sort of deal agreed upon. We're not seeing, though, as big a bang as one might expect in U.S. equities.
Yeah, a bit of a cautious bid. I mean, obviously, the stocks you would expect to react strongly are doing well. Those tech hardware, chip makers, your transportation stocks. I mean, if you listen to that little bit of a soundbite from the China press conferences, there is still some things that you would normally think of as just procedural hurdles, like the translation and the actual, writing of the agreement. In these negotiations, those types of things are not sort of rubber stamp procedural things. Those are things that could delay the agreement, could complicate things. Believe it or not, that translation back and forth is a tricky thing, and sometimes the translation comes back and it's not exactly what they agreed to. So, understandably, the market's a little bit cautious. I mean, obviously, we're at record highs in the stock market. They've priced in optimism about this deal. But I think, there still will be a little bit of baked-in skepticism that will prevent a really sort of a face-ripping rally until all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
Thank you so much, Mike Regan. We are seeing that rally continue, and right now, Chinese authorities are answering questions in the press conference on trade. Let's take a listen.
The tariff exemptions for Chinese products entering the United States, thus reversing the trend of tariff hikes. This is commitment made by the U.S. side. As far as I know, right now the United States is also holding a press conference, and we expect the U.S. side to release the relevant information. But as for the Chinese tariffs, now that the U.S. side has committed to remove part of the tariffs levied on China, on Chinese products, and also increase tariff exemptions for Chinese products entering the United States. This is a commitment made by the U.S. side. We do hope the U.S. side will earnestly fulfill this commitment. And the Chinese side will also consider not introducing the tariffs on the U.S. products that are scheduled on December the 15th. So this is the commitment reached by the two sides on the tariff issue in the Phase 1 agreement. Well, there is no doubt that China will increase imports of quality and competitive agricultural products from the U.S. The Phase 1 agreement is in the review process. So as for the specific details and the statistics of the agreement will be released on other occasions. Economic Daily. After the signing of the agreement, there will be a massive increase in the import of agricultural products from the United States. So will this affect the domestic industries in China? Well, thank you. Thank you for your question. The Phase 1 trade agreement between China and the United States will be an agreement based on equality, mutual benefit, and win-win cooperation. The chapter on food and agricultural product trade fully captures the concerns of the two sides in the agricultural sector. The implementation of the agreement will first and foremost expand the exports of Chinese agricultural products to the United States. Because every year we also export a lot of agricultural products to the U.S. During the consultation, the Chinese side has adhered to our legitimate demands. And through repeated consultations, the U.S. has published the ultimate or final rules that permits the export of cooked poultry and catfish products from China to the United States. And China is now a country that is able to export cooked poultry to the United States, like Canada, Mexico, and Chile. And China is also one of the 3 countries that is able to export catfish to the United States. In the meantime, the U.S.
We've been listening to the deputy chief negotiator in Beijing discussing the agreement. They say they have reached with the United States. We are seeing a rally kind of fade a little bit as some of the details come out and as authorities in Beijing answer questions from the people in attendance there. We're seeing right now the S&P up 0.2%, the NASDAQ 0.3%, and the Dow up also about 0.3%. Meanwhile, you're seeing Treasury yields lower as it's unclear how much this moves the ball forward. And after getting disappointing retail sales, we also got the press conference with Boris Johnson after the decisive win, as well as the impeachment vote in the House, voting to move forward with the impeachment proceedings. Joining us now by phone, John Authers, who is a Bloomberg opinion columnist, as well as senior markets reporter and columnist for Bloomberg News, as well as Josh Wingrove, who covers all things having to do with the White House and trade from Washington, D.C. Josh, I want to start with you. Do we have any sense of what the agreement is as we hear from some of the sort of tricklings from both sides here?
Yeah, it's coming in shortly, but it's just been an absurd morning, to be honest.
Oh, I'm aware. I'm fully aware. Have no fear.
They just said, as far as I know, the U.S. is holding a press conference right now and is releasing relevant information. That's not the case. There's been no U.S. information released whatsoever, aside from a presidential tweet that indicated that there was no tariff rollback as part of this deal, but the Chinese just said that there was. So this is really a moving target right now. It's quite active. fundamentally you have sources or officials publicly saying from either side that there is some type of deal. There are indications that that deal includes some commitment of agriculture purchases on behalf of the Chinese. There is dispute as to whether the U.S. would roll back existing tariffs. There seems to be agreement for the U.S. not to put in new tariffs that were set to go in place this Sunday, but really it's an on-the-fly situation, and the U.S. has provided basically no clarity whatsoever on what this deal includes.
Josh, you summed it up. It has been an insane morning of news dumps on all fronts. Just to bring you some of the headlines from the Chinese side, the first phase of the trade talks have achieved a major advancement. They said the U.S. to remove tariffs on Chinese goods in phases, and that they are going to agree to some sort of last stage as soon as possible, and they are going to work to set a date for a signing deal. So all of this coming as there does seem to be some sort of agreement. China saying that there is not going to be the December 15th tariffs. John Authors, as a market participant, let's say, how do you read all of this? Do you just basically stay out and just wait for the dust to settle? Or is the even unclear, fuzzy deal that both sides seem to be talking about enough to dive in?
It depends which market you're talking about. I would say in terms of the US stock market, we are already so fully priced and so confident that a good deal is going to be reached that I would not dream of committing any capital on the basis of the information we have so far, and I wouldn't commit an awful lot of capital even if all the news we get in the next 24, 48 hours is good. Around the rest of the world, the biggest sufferers from this have been the confusion of the last 2 years have been largely in Asia. Look at how the Kospi has been doing in Korea for the last couple of years, for example. I think there probably is quite a bit of upside there if we merely manage to indeed have the positive answer to the question people have been posing for a long time recently, which is can they avoid imposing the new tariffs this weekend? But beyond that, I would not. I completely agree. I just can't see why any responsible person looking after other people's money would make any significant moves on the back of what we've heard in the last few hours.
Josh, I'd love to get your sense. President Trump tweeting out about an hour ago in response to a Wall Street Journal saying there hadn't been a deal struck necessarily, saying the Wall Street Journal story on China deal is completely wrong, especially their statement on tariffs, fake news. They should find a better leaker. Is it a political liability for President Trump to roll back tariffs or to not implement the December 15th tariffs? In other words, can you frame this in a political frame to better understand the Washington, D.C. angle of this?
Yeah, I think that Donald Trump wants to go into 2020 with a couple of things. He wants to show that he's being tough on China. This is sort of a rare point of bipartisan agreement in today's Washington. And he wants to tell farmers, who of course make up a big part of his base, that he got a bunch of Chinese orders on the books for them. And I think that that's driving a lot of this right now. Trump is really reluctant to take tariffs back. It's easier for aides to talk him out of adding new ones. So I think it would be perfectly logical, knowing what we know about him. The first rule of which is that everything is unpredictable. But the second rule is that they might be able to sort of stick the landing there. Like, Mr. President, we are not going to do these new tariffs. These talks are continuing. We're really close to a deal, good faith, etc. But talking him off the ones that are already in place, either reducing the tariff level, the percentage, or the number of products that they apply to. The Chinese have just said, by the way, that both things are happening. That seems tougher. So we don't know whether Trump has agreed to that.
Just to give you a sense of what else we're hearing out of that press conference, China is going to allow more soybeans, rice, and poultry. They said China's imports of wheat, corn, rice to be strictly under quotas, and that they said that the U.S. has agreed to allow Chinese poultry exports. They're talking about how they have what to export as well. We are seeing soy prices rise on the heels of this, as well as corn. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, John Authors, just real quick here, 30 seconds, does this give support to Chinese assets from your perspective?
It probably does compared to where we were before, but not a great deal. I think what we really want to support Chinese assets from here is somebody to do what's not happened at any stage in the last 2 years, which is actually remove some tariffs once they've been imposed. That hasn't happened yet, and that's the key thing I think that we now want to see happen.
John Authors, Bloomberg opinion columnist and senior economics correspondent, thank you so much for being with us. Josh Wingrove, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure it is going to be a very busy morning for you covering trade here as we cover the White House from Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, of course, over in Washington, D.C., we did have the impeachment vote, and Nathan Hager is in our 99.1 studios with an update on what we've learned. Nathan.
Lisa, it was history made in a quick session that came after hours of contentious debate that lasted well into the night last night. But in the end, the House Judiciary Committee has done what many expected and approved 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump, one for abuse of power, the other for obstruction of Congress, both related to efforts by the Trump team to pressure Ukraine to announce investigations against President Trump's political rival, Joe Biden. Both of these articles were approved by votes of 23 to 17, setting up a vote in the full House as to whether to send these articles to the Senate for a trial. A Democratic aide tells Bloomberg that vote could come as soon as Wednesday. Ahead of this move, President Trump tweeted the following, quote, "How do you get impeached when you have done nothing wrong, a perfect call, have created the best economy in the history of our country, rebuilt our military, fixed the VA, choice, cut taxes and regs, protected your Second Amendment, created jobs, 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 and so much more. Crazy," end quote.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Stocks have lifted off as China said major progress has been made on the U.S.-China trade agreement. A Chinese official said both Washington and Beijing see better trade relations as a good thing. AT&T has switched on 5G service in 10 markets, among them Los Angeles and San Francisco. Millions of customers will now have access to the next generation network. But to take advantage of it now, they'll have to upgrade to the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus. There may be another massive worldwide recall of auto safety bags. Regulators are evaluating the safety of as many as 100 million inflators made by Japan's Takata. This would be on top of previous recalls that were linked to 23 deaths worldwide. And online shoppers are getting fewer discounts on toys this holiday season, despite an effort by retailers to start sales earlier. Toys were discounted on average 15 to 18% into Cyber Monday this year, compared to the average drop of 31% last year, according to UBS. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
My name is Hunter Hayes. I know myself, and I know my buzzed warning signs. One shot is about knowing my limits, or not necessarily knowing my limits.
I start with one shot to have a good time.
One of the signs that I'm starting to feel a little buzz is when I start solving not only my own problems, but the entire world's problems. When I know I'm going out, I know I'm going to start with calling for a ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Want to power through your projects for less? Get 20% off power tools at the B&Q Tool Shop. Like the Bosch 18-volt 2-battery combi drill. Was £80, now only £64. You can do it when you B&Q it. Excludes DeWalt 18-volt 4-amp combi drill, Dremel 3000 15-piece and power tool clearance. Ends 24th November. In-store only on 23rd and 24th November, subject to availability.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Hey, TuneIn listeners, Steve Kornacki here from NBC News. I want to tell you about a podcast I'm hosting called Article 2, Inside Impeachment. It's dedicated to bringing you the latest developments on the impeachment inquiry into President Trump. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I talk to NBC News reporters who are closest to the story to break down what's new, what matters, and what it means for the 2020 election. Search and favorite Article 2, Inside Impeachment on TuneIn.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up to all the traders out there, if you understand fully what is happening and what is going to happen on this on this Friday the 13th, please call in and let us know, because on one hand, you've got China rolling back tariffs, or saying that the U.S. has agreed to do so. President Trump coming out with a tweet saying that, yes, they will not impose the December 15th tariffs, but that there has been no agreement to roll back the 25% tariffs. Markets are throwing up their hands, throwing their pencils in the air and saying, do you know what's going on? And Greg Jarrett's going to explain it to us. Greg Jarrett with the Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Triskaidekaphobia. That's the only explanation for all of this, Lisa. And speaking of throwing up, if you're a little bit seesawed here, that is a roller coaster. First, President Donald Trump said yesterday there is a phase one China trade deal. Stocks soared. Then a Wall Street Journal report indicated there was a holdup. Stocks went down. Then Chinese officials held a news conference to say China and the U.S. have agreed on the text of a phase one trade deal, which will see the removal of tariffs on Chinese goods in stages. Well, stocks moved back into the green, and now they are backing off again from their earlier highs. Jeffrey Yu at UBS Wealth Management may have an idea. He says phase one doesn't really mean all is peachy with the markets moving forward.
Is going to be in place, but I don't think there's an outright cost with the lack of a phase two deal or a permanent ceasefire, let's just say. It's the opportunity cost. With globalization, with ongoing intertwining of supply chains, what would productivity growth be? Where would global trend growth be? If there's going to be decoupling, if there's going to be divergence, does that drag global trend growth, global potential growth?
Let's throw another piece into the Friday the 13th stew. Boris Johnson's gamble on early elections paid off as voters gave the U.S. Prime Minister a commanding majority to take the country out of the European Union by the end of January, a decisive result after more than 3 years of stalemate over Brexit. Let's look at the numbers. S&P is little change now, up 1. Dow's up 0.1%, up 35. The Nasdaq's up 0.3%, up 25. The 10-year's up 7/32, the yield 1.86%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.9% at 59.71 a barrel, while COMEX gold's up 0.2% at 14.7520 an ounce. The dollar yen 109.42, the euro $1.1138, and the British pound $1.3324. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
What a day on this Friday, the 13th. We have such a news dump here, and all of the news is brought to you by VentureLink at NJIT, a business accelerator offering the resources and its support that tech companies need to thrive. More at njit.edu/entrepreneurship. The key question here is, well, what's going on for markets? Because we have so much news with the U.S. saying that we have come to some sort of trade agreement with China. China seeming to indicate, yes, that's true, but now some of the details seem to be in dispute, with China saying that the U.S. has agreed to roll back some existing tariffs. President Trump saying, yes, they're not going to impose the December 15th tariffs, but there is no plan to roll back the 25% tariffs that were imposed earlier. Here to make sense of all of the headlines and try to figure out what we ought to be paying attention to, we have with us Michael McKee, who is our international economics correspondent here, and Kriti Gupta, who covers all things cross-asset for us on our Bloomberg News desk. And I'm wondering, Mike, can you just give us a sense, first of all, is there any concrete detail that we have both sides agreeing on at this point that we can sink our teeth into and trade on?
No.
Okay. All right. Kriti. No, kidding. Go carry on. But what about the December 15th tariffs that they're not going into effect? That does seem to be
agreement. That does appear to be. The Chinese didn't specifically say that put percentages on things, but the president says the December 15th tariffs will not be imposed, and so at this point, that is maybe the one thing. If you were trading negative on the idea that we were going to have a terrible imposition, tariffs that were terrible on consumer goods, you could now take those trades off. But we don't exactly know the way the president tweeted the tariff announcement. He said that the tariffs in September are he said the tariffs. Most of the tariffs will be rolled back to 7.5%. We're guessing maybe he means the September 15% tariffs, but we don't really know. And what about the tariffs that have been on earlier? It's very hard to say at this point exactly what the details are. And the Chinese aren't saying anything other than the U.S. will do something.
Well, but except that they are confirming that there is some sort of text that has been agreed upon, which was thought of as a big deal. Kriti, a lot of people were saying that this was sort of the important thing. The December 15th tariffs, that was the line in the sand. That gets rolled back. That is positive. Right now, it does not seem like markets know what to do, because you're looking at an S&P that's now turned back negative and a NASDAQ that's up less than 0.2%. So is that just not the case, that December 15th tariffs, that line in the sand, just kicking that back was not enough?
You know, I wish it was. And I think what would really help the situation here is if we had some numbers to prove it. And I think Mike really hit that on the head. What you're looking for right now is exactly what the rollback is from the Chinese side. I think we had a headline out saying that China would make the corresponding moves to the U.S. tariff cuts. Now, what does that mean? Especially considering this new Trump tweet saying that, well, it's not a complete tariff rollback. Yeah. Now, if it was a complete tariff rollback, I think we might see a bit more positive reaction. But because we're still kind of in that unknown phase, I mean, it's the uncertainty that's coming out here, especially after yesterday, because a lot of this did come into the market yesterday, where we did see big gains across asset classes because they were expecting things to really go well.
So we don't know what is going on exactly in U.S. equities in terms of picking a direction. We do know that the pound has been rallying on the heels of the UK election with Boris Johnson and his decisive victory. We do see corn and other grains, corn and soy prices rallying, with the idea that perhaps there will be just an acceleration in purchases from China. Any other moves that we should really note?
I'm really paying attention to oil right now. Oil has a really interesting story, because in the past, when you see Trump trade headlines, oil tends to move pretty volatile volatility, if that's the word, almost 3%, 5% move. So lately what we're seeing, yesterday especially, we only saw a 1% move. Right now, even we're about 0.8% up today on Brent. That's a really strange thing to see. If we saw, a really big market sentiment saying, you know what, all's good, we're back to where we were 2 years ago before all these trade tensions happened, things are looking great, I think that would show up in the oil market first, because that would really bring back that demand picture that we were missing. So I would really pay attention to what the oil market's doing here. They seem to kind of have a better grasp on things. That's a very, very vague statement. And the reason I say that is because we're still seeing oil move, whereas we're seeing the S&P relatively flat on the day at the moment, and not making huge gains earlier in the day when all this news came out.
Kriti Gupta, thank you so much for being with us, cross-asset reporter. Mike, thank you so much. Also, Michael McKee is our international economics correspondent for us at Bloomberg Television. We're seeing the 10-year yield actually indicated lower, going lower, as well as 2-year yields. Interesting. There is a direction there, but that comes after yields spiked, priced down yesterday, both 2 and 10-year denominations. Right now, let's head to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager there with World and National Headlines. Nathan.
From Capitol Hill.
Chairman Jerry Nadler postponed the vote overnight, and the meeting this morning lasted barely 7 minutes. The clerk reported the party line vote on asking a foreign power, Ukraine, to aid President Trump's re-election.
Mr. Chairman, there are 23 ayes and 17 noes.
The article is agreed to. The question now is on Article 2 of the resolution, impeaching President Donald J. Trump for obstructing Congress.
Mr. Chairman, there are 23 ayes and 17 noes.
The resolution is amended and is ordered reported favorably to the House.
The House will vote next week. Senate Leader Mitch McConnell says the impeachment trial should be dispatched in reasonably short order, depending on what the White House wants. On Capitol Hill, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
And shortly after that committee vote, President Trump went on Twitter to tout what he calls a very large Phase 1 trade deal with China, saying 25% tariffs will remain as is, but levies on consumer goods that were due to kick in Sunday will not be charged. The president also tweeted that negotiations on a Phase 2 deal will begin immediately. China's vice commerce minister is speaking to reporters right now. He is not commenting on that tweet. A suspect is under arrest in the stabbing death of a Barnard College student. The New York Times reports a 13-year-old boy was arrested this morning and charged with murder, robbery, and criminal possession of a weapon. 18-year-old Tessa Majors was stabbed to death Wednesday night in Manhattan's Morningside Park, blocks from the Barnard campus. We're just getting word Danny Aiello, the New York-born film and stage actor who earned an Academy Award nomination for his role in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, died yesterday at the age of 86. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Are you in?
Ho, ho, ho. Who's made a list this year?
I want a new phone, one with amazing cameras, ultra-wide lens, of course, live focus video. Well, it has to be 5G ready to stream all my films. Can it come with something awesome to listen to them through?
Darling, I think he was talking to the kids.
Get everything you want and more. Purchase a Samsung 5G ready device and claim a pair of silver wireless Galaxy Buds at no extra cost. Shop our 5G handsets in store or online at your local Vodafone store or Vodafone.co.uk. 18 plus. Offer excludes Galaxy Fold 5G. Purchased by the 25th of the 12/19. Claim from Samsung within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
You never know where life will take you, which is why the new BMW 3 Series Touring is perfect if you're all packed up for or escaping to. It has extensive storage and an automatic tailgate, handy if your hands are full. And it even has an optional intelligent voice assistant to help you at every turn. The new BMW 3 Series Touring. Book your 24-hour test drive today. Test drive subject to status and availability. Participating retailers only.
Some days life can get in the way of catching up on the news that moves your world. TuneIn is here to help. With live 24/7 coverage from CNN wherever you go on the TuneIn app, you can always find a slice of your schedule, however long, to check in on the biggest stories of the day.
Hell hath no fury. The president's counselor went on a rampage on a taped phone call with Washington Examiner reporter.
Search CNN on TuneIn to get the live news when it matters most.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! It takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
The move, and a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team. Live at home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Don't want to miss a second of your NFL team's next matchup? Let TuneIn remind you. Just make sure notifications are enabled on your phone and search for your team profile on the TuneIn app. Then, find the game you want under events and tap Notify Me. We'll send you an alert as soon as live coverage begins.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
A swirl of trade headlines is whipsawing financial markets. Investors are just trying to assess the contours of a partial deal reached between the U.S. and China. And we look at those numbers, which are changing rapidly every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is little change now, up 1. The Dow's up 0.1%, up 30. NASDAQ's up 0.3%, up 25. The 10-year is up 10.30 seconds. The yield is 1.85%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.8% at 59.66 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.1% at 14.7430 an ounce. The dollar yen 109.39. The euro $1.1131. And the British pound $1.3325. U.S. retail sales missed forecasts, calling for an acceleration in November's. Clothing stores and restaurants posted declines, signaling the economy's main engine may cool in the fourth quarter by more than previously thought. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Quite a Friday the 13th of news. We've got the China and U.S. trade deal coming to some sort of fruition. We're getting some conflicting details. The most concrete aspect that we do know is that the U.S. will not impose the December 15th tariffs. Both sides agreeing on that, with Chinese negotiators saying that, and then President Trump following up with a tweet. Less clear about whether the U.S. would roll back any existing tariffs, with China saying that they would, and President Trump saying that they won't. How does a trader negotiate with all of this data and figure out what to do? And joining us now to speak about just that, David Kudla. He's Chief Executive Officer and Chief Investment Strategist at Mainstay Capital Management. David, what did you make of today?
Good morning, Lisa. Well, I think that, this is actually good news for investors and good news for the markets. There's a lot of confusion about what the phase one deal really constitutes. But the good news for the markets and good news for investors is what we know, at least, is there's no further escalation of the trade war. The tariffs that were going to go in on December 15th won't go in. There won't be any retaliatory tariffs from the Chinese. And, the tariffs that were going in for the U.S. were not only punitive on the U.S. tariffs for the Chinese were not only punitive on Chinese goods, but they were going to impact a lot of U.S. companies as well. So it was very important in that respect. The result is we see no further escalation, and that's what the markets want to hear.
Right, that's what the markets want to hear. That's what we've been hearing all along, and yet you're looking right now at an S&P basically flat, the NASDAQ up 0.2%, the Dow basically unchanged. I mean, how come we're not seeing a bigger pop?
Well, there could be a little bit of buy the rumor, sell the news, because we've been hearing this over the past couple of days. I think there's been some expectation that this is what we get. That I think there's been an expectation by the markets that the tariffs would not go into an effect. So we've had a pretty good week for the markets the last couple of days. We've got green for the Dow and NASDAQ, flat on the S&P 500, but the last couple of days, we've had. Or at least, yesterday, pretty good market. And I think, though, that if you take the combination of this and certainty on Brexit with Boris Johnson's big win and what we're seeing with action out of the Fed and what's coming there, we've got a constructive environment for stocks here through the end of the year and headed into 2020.
Okay, that's actually something similar to what Kara Kadana, chief U.S. economist, was saying earlier this morning. He was saying if you get some sort of truce where you don't get the December 15th tariffs, we have that the UK election over, we're probably going to get Brexit pretty easily next month. That's going to turbocharge the U.S. economy. How much do you think that will translate into significant gains in U.S. equities and other risk assets?
Well, it's interesting when we look at all the factors, and we've had 3 quarters of negative earnings growth, or basically earnings contraction, and probably going to have a struggle in the fourth quarter again with earnings. We look for earnings to improve in 2020, but earnings just haven't mattered really this year, as evident by the advance we've seen in the major indexes, and even with all the anxiety over the trade war and the uncertainty over Brexit and these other factors. What it's really come back to, we believe, is the Fed and the amount of liquidity that they are injecting into the system. We had, at this time last year, a very hostile Fed in terms of their tone towards the market. And that was a big part of what we think, big part of the sell-off we saw last year, 19.6% by Christmas Eve of last year in the fourth quarter, from September 20th through December 24th. The Fed changed their tone, and the markets did a lot better starting on December 26th and did well all year. quantitative tightening has turned to quantitative easing. We've gotten that somewhat forced on the Fed through these repo operations, but that money going into the system, that injection of liquidity is more money all the same that's going into, it's making its way into equities, making its way into the financial markets. And, we go back to that old adage, don't fight the Fed. And I think that's one of the most important catalysts for the markets going forward. And that money's coming to the system, and it's pushing asset prices higher.
David, that's a really salient point, especially as we see yields go lower today on this deal. And this comes after they rose quite a bit yesterday. Yields up, price down with the prospect of some sort of trade deal looming ever imminent. And the idea is that, how high can Treasury yields go given how much liquidity the Fed is pumping into the system, and that kind of reality where you have stable rates and you have a constructive business environment is going to be perfect for U.S. equities, and that's what people have been saying. What kind of returns are you expecting next year for the S&P?
Well, we've obviously had a better year this year than many would have expected, and I think that next year we could be surprised again. I could give the normal forecast that everyone gives. We'll get somewhere between 6 and 9% returns that you hear a lot of people forecast every year. Yeah. But I think next year we've got an election year. I'll say the same thing I said last year, that the economy would be better than many expected. We had so many predicting a recession, so many predicting a bear market last year at this time. And, I just wouldn't be surprised if we see double-digit returns for the major indexes next year.
Interesting. And just real quick also, because we do have you from Michigan, I'm wondering what the trade deal could mean for the auto industry, given how beaten up, or not beaten up, but certainly with auto sales in decline for as long as they have, or decelerating to the degree they have.
Well, it's very important because, and we've talked about this, it's just the auto industry, and when we talk about these tariffs on imports, it's not the same environment of 40 or 50 years ago. There is so many parts and subsystems and vehicles that are shipped abroad and cross international lines. When you look at between Michigan and Canada and between the U.S. and Mexico, it's literally as if the assembly lines crisscross those international lines. Yeah. So it's very important that there's certainty, certainly for supply chains and for where vehicles are being produced and shipped to, that the auto companies have certainty as they're determining where they put plants, where they develop their supply chains. And because many of the automakers, U.S. and otherwise, are global automakers now, right. What's going on here is very disruptive to the U.S. automakers, GM, Ford, Fiat Chrysler, and automakers around the world. So, as much as anything, they want to see some certainty around this. So the more this gets worked out, the better.
David Kudla, Chief Executive Officer and Chief Investment Strategist at Mainstay Capital Management. From New York, I'm Lisa Abramowitz, Paul Sweeney off today, and this is Bloomberg.
Deep on... Wow, that was the most beautiful bit of film I've ever seen.
Eh?
What performances! Did you see the pups' faces? They loved it. But such emotion, such intensity.
Sergey, it was an advert for snacks.
I don't remember the last time I felt so moved.
Oh, boy.
Oh.
Enjoy 2-for-1 cinema tickets from Meerkat Movies when you buy through Compare the Market.
Qualifying purchases, Tuesdays or Wednesdays, participating cinemas, 2 standard tickets only, cheapest ticket free, T's and C's apply.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
From ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
How will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 Podcasts, Season 6. Listen in favorite 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Is there any bank right now in the U.S. that you think is a buy?
Do you think Chairman Powell has lost the market?
Jeff Bezos is no dope. What's the big ka-ching?
The big question, I think, for investors is free cash flow.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
The U.S. tariffs actually hurt both China and the U.S.
Large strategics are looking to either buy or invest in innovation.
Soybeans and corn have been basically at or below the cost of production for about 4 or 5 years.
What we see more bonds, more yield.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Trade dominating the data dump, the news dump of this Friday, the 13th. Coming up, we're going to be speaking with Leland Miller, Chief Executive Officer of China Beige Book International, and a fantastic day to be speaking with him as we do get some sense of what perhaps a phase 1 deal may look like. Plus, we are going to be talking about the effects on agriculture as there are some agreements as far as purchases go there. Right now, though, let's head over to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, stocks jumped to record highs early after Chinese officials announced they have agreed to a gradual reduction in tariffs as part of the interim trade deal between Beijing and Washington, but have since reversed those gains as neither side delivered enough details to assuage investors. Fresh trade headlines overshadowed the UK election that puts that country on track to leave the European Union next month. Carolyn Fairburn, CBI Director General, tells Bloomberg the UK vote is simply good for business.
A huge day for business because those layers of uncertainty are beginning to peel back. We do now think we know the Brexit timetable. We do think we now have transition running through until the end of December. But what we so urgently need clarity on is that there won't be another no-deal Brexit next year and that the direction of travel is one that's business-friendly.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 0.2%, now down 5. Dow's down 0.1%, down 31, and the Nasdaq's little changed, up 5. The 10-year is up 16.30 seconds with a yield of 1.83%. West Texas Intermediate crude is staying in the green, up 0.6% at 59.53 a barrel, while COMEX gold's up 0.3% at 14.7690 an ounce. The dollar yen 109.26. The euro $1.1137, and the British pound $1.3345. Deutsche Bank is considering deep cuts to bonuses this year as Chief Executive Officer Christian Savings seeks to eliminate billions of euros of costs in a radical restructuring. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa Abramowitz.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much. And Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Adipar. Adipar's portfolio reporting and insights platform is trusted by thousands of wealth advisors from family offices, RIAs, and large financial institutions. Learn more at addepar.com. That's addepar.com. So it is trade all the time. It has to do with China. The details that we know at this point that both sides seem to have agreed agreed upon is A, there does appear to be some text that has been agreed upon, and B, the December 15th tariffs will not go into effect. Chinese negotiators saying that U.S. has agreed to roll back some of the existing tariffs. President Trump tweeting out that perhaps some of the levies will be reduced, but sort of unclear as to what that is. Joining us here in our Interactive Broker Studios, Leland Miller, Chief Executive Officer of China Beige Book International. And we've been framing a lot of the trade negotiations in the light of who does the trade war hurt more, the U.S. or China? Can you give us a sense of whether that is a legitimate frame to view the negotiations through, that basically China's hurting so much that they need to come to the table?
It's a good framework, but it's only one of the many frameworks. I mean, you also have to look at what President Trump feels as pressure as you approach 2020. That's why we're doing a deal right now. So there's various pressures on the two sides, and China is hurt more by tariffs, and then the U.S. does have more leverage, but President Trump has more time-sensitive pressure right now. So there's a lot going on, and I think both sides have been pushing towards a deal, and this is where we start.
When you talk about China saying that they are going to roll back some of their tariffs in tandem with the U.S. doing the same, how big of a victory is that? I mean, can you give us a sense of what kind of tariffs China does put on U.S. imports and imports from other nations?
Well, the problem from the very beginning for the Chinese is that they didn't have a reciprocal amount, even close, to be able to put tariff for tariff on U.S. goods. So they applied tariffs, but these were never particularly damaging. The companies they hurt the most were ones that were sort of facing it from both directions. They were paying China tariffs and they were paying U.S. tariffs. They're sort of caught in the middle. So this is the pullback on the Chinese side is important in that it's another element of de-escalation, but it's not the headline here. The headline is certainly what the Chinese are getting on tariff rollback and or reduction, and what the U.S. is getting in terms of reforms outside of purchases, which is the real big question right now.
Well, and have we gotten any kind of detail on that whatsoever?
No, and I think that's one of the reasons that this thing has been in flux all day long. What was being announced yesterday, it was interesting. Almost every news source had a different twist on what was supposedly coming out, but everybody had this some level of gigantic deal with huge rollbacks, and this is very interesting from our perspective because very recently, even, I mean, this past week, there was still a lot of internal discussion amongst the administration's team on whether the best method to move forward was rate reductions or rollbacks. And so there didn't seem to be an agreement yet. What we're seeing come into play right now is it looks like neither won out. They're both part of the solution, and you're going to see a tariff rate reduction at first, and then you're going to probably see, I think this is what's next, you're going to be seeing some of these other tariffs rolled back as the Chinese deliver on their purchase agreement. So this is sort of a combo deal that's being put in there so that the U.S. maintains a little bit more leverage.
Do we have a sense of whether the Phase 2 negotiations are baked into this Phase 1 deal? In other words, a time frame, what the issues are going to be, something to get a little bit more into the public domain?
So what I've been saying for several months now is that there's not going to be a Phase 2 or a Phase 3. Now I have to tweak that now, because what Phase 1 has become is a multi-phase agreement on itself. So that now Phase 1B is going to be the equivalent of Phase 2, and so this basically people are going to be able to call anything any way they want. If whatever happens today in the signing, in the next few days, will be part of this first phase, and the next part of it will be an extension of Phase 1, but will it be Phase 2 or Phase 1B? I mean, this is going to start getting really confusing.
I'm just imagining the sort of the Roman numeral outline that we're creating for Phase 1 is going to be extensive. What is the implication for the Chinese economy? In other words, will this allow an acceleration, or at least a ceasing in the deceleration that we've seen?
It may not. It won't stop the deceleration of the Chinese economy overall, because that has a structural reason having to do with the fact that the Chinese economy has too much debt. But what the Chinese have been trying to do, they've been trying to do since the very beginning of the trade war, is avert some of the worst case scenarios. They want to make the situation better for themselves. It's not tariffs that are crushing growth in China, but these make it very difficult to enact any type of reforms, to allow businesses to go bust, because it's just additional pressure added on. So if the Chinese can lessen the amount of pressure from tariffs and from Trump, then all of a sudden it becomes a little bit easier to do the things that they need to do to fix the economy.
All right. And so just can you give us a sense of the lay of the land in China? Because we've heard a lot about defaults and picking up in China. How are things going?
Well, we're going to have data coming out in the coming days, and so I don't want to jump the gun on this. But what I will say is this. There is an enormous amount of credit being pumped into the system in China, and we saw that in Q2, Q3. We saw it early in our Q4 data. There is this idea that the Chinese economy is not getting sufficient stimulus. It's nonsense. We're seeing some of the highest credit provision levels that we've ever seen all the way back 10 years in China Beige Book. We're not seeing the heavy infrastructure stimulus stuff yet. We may never see it. Hopefully we don't. But we are seeing plenty of credit going to firms from the banking sector, from the shadow banking sector, bond sales at an all-time high. So there is plenty of reason why they're keeping this thing fluffed up. And I think if you also get a relief from some of the tariff pressures, then you may see a little bit of improvement in the coming weeks and months.
Leland Miller, thank you so much for coming in today. Fantastic insight. Leland Miller, Chief Executive Officer of China Beige Book International, joining us here in our Interactive Broker studios, just to give you a sense of what markets are doing now, because they've had a hard time trying to figure out what direction to go. And the S&P now lower by more than 0.1%. The NASDAQ higher by 0.1%. The Dow also lower by 0.1%, being whipsawed all over the place today as we do get at least a non-implementation of that December 15th tariff deadline. So basically, we're not going to see those tariffs, but there is a question as to phase 1B, C, Q, R. This is Bloomberg. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager with World and National Headlines. Nathan.
All right, Lisa, thank you. After hours of at times angry debate last night, the House Judiciary Committee has made quick work of 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump this morning.
Mr. Chairman, there are 23 ayes and 17 noes.
Your article is agreed to. The committee approved both articles by that same party line vote. Now they head to the full House of Representatives for a vote on whether to begin a Senate trial, and that vote could come Wednesday. Republican Mike Johnson sits on the Judiciary Committee.
The party in charge, even if you have the majority in Congress, you don't get to remove a president because you don't like him. They did not produce a scintilla of evidence to support a charge of impeachment.
In a statement, the White House says President Trump looks forward to receiving fair treatment and due process in the Senate. In the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is calling for national unity after his Conservative Party's resounding election victory.
I frankly urge everyone on either side of what are, after 3.5 years, after all, an increasingly arid argument. I urge everyone to find closure and to let the healing begin.
Johnson spoke outside number 10 Downing Street the morning after the Tories picked up 364 seats to the Labour Party's 202. Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn says he will step aside after a new leader is chosen early next year. The Supreme Court could make a decision as soon as today on whether to take up President Trump's effort to keep his financial records out of the hands of Congress and a New York prosecutor. This could set up a constitutional showdown to rival the fight over the Nixon tapes in 1974. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
In a perfect world, you'd be listening at exactly the same moment the most important things are said.
Negotiations over a trade deal are advancing.
Instead, we designed the perfect show.
They discussed risks and the transition to renewable energy.
June Grasso and Ed Baxter.
The conversation continues with a focus on trade.
Bloomberg Best, weekday evenings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community. Support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the...
Dear Dad, Merry Christmas. Thank you for always doing everything you could to make this time of year special for us. No one has a Christmas jumper collection quite like yours. Your festive spirit...
Gingerbread latte with 2 shots and nutmeg whipped cream for Joe.
I hope it snows. I know how you love a white Christmas. All my love, Joe. Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app and get 20% off when you buy a card and gift this Christmas. Use code HEARTFELT20. Exclusions apply.
Hey, tune in listeners. Steve Kornacki here from NBC News. I want to tell you about a podcast I'm hosting called Article 2, Inside Impeachment. It's dedicated to bringing you the latest developments on the impeachment inquiry into President Trump. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I talk to NBC News reporters who are closest to the story to break down what's new, what matters, and what it means for the 2020 election. Search and favorite Article 2, Inside Impeachment on TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
To LeBron, slam dunk.
The NBA is on TuneIn Premium. Each week, TuneIn picks an NBA game you just can't miss. The Miami Heat are taking their talents to Texas to take on the second-year phenom, Luka Doncic, and the Dallas Mavericks.
Pulls back, trying to make it 11-2.
This Saturday, the Miami Heat are at the Dallas Mavericks. Tip-off is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Search NBA on TuneIn to follow your favorite NBA team today.
On the goal line, scores! It takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
Lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
We're watching markets continue to fluctuate. S&P is swinging between gains and losses. The dollar is also fluctuating with treasuries as neither side of the U.S.-China trade war delivered enough detail to calm investors who sent stocks to records yesterday on reports that the fresh tariffs due Sunday have been averted. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is now down 0.2%, down 6. The Dow's down 0.2%, down 46, and the NASDAQ is little changed. A 10-year is up 18.30 seconds with a yield of 1.82%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.7% at 59.58 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 0.3% at 14.7690 an ounce. The dollar yen 109.29. The euro $1.1119, and the British pound $1.3325. Personal banking information for tens of thousands of Facebook workers in the U.S. has been compromised. A thief apparently stole several corporate hard drives from an employee's car. Hard drives which were encrypted included payroll data, employee names, bank account numbers, and the last 4 digits of their social security numbers. Facebook right now is down 1.5%. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Now on Bloomberg Markets, Unis in Focus with Joe Mysak.
Indeed, it is that time of the week when we have Munis in Focus, which is brought to you by Build America Mutual. BAM, Green Star Bonds finance projects that protect and restore the environment with more renewable energy and efficient transportation and buildings. Visit buildamerica.com/Greenstar. BAM, Building America. And joining us, as he does at this time of the week, is Joe Mysak, editor of the Bloomberg Brief, which is focused on the municipal bond market for Bloomberg News. And Joe, you know, it's interesting. We're so caught up in the news today. There's actually so much on the terms of trade, as well as the UK elections, as well as impeachment, as well as U.S. economic data, that we've almost forgotten to do what we're supposed to be doing at this time of year, which is looking ahead to 2020 at projections. So I want to bring it back to that with you and get your sense about how good next year will be for the B-bond bankers out there.
Oh, baby.
Oh, baby.
Wow. The top prediction so far is for $450 billion in 2020, Lisa, and I think that we could very easily reach that. That would be a new record. And, of course, the underwriters are very happy. And, actually, the citizens should be happy as well, because what does it mean? It's what you've been talking about all year. Rates are very low. Why aren't municipalities going out and borrowing money to, fulfill their needs?
Yeah, so basically you're going to see them actually start to borrow money after passing a bunch of resolutions in the popular mandate, right, that give them the authority to do so, correct? And that's why there's been this lag time.
Yeah, we've had some nice ballot proposals. I always call them bond elections, and people have been very accommodating toward those. They like the idea of borrowing money now and starting to get to work on a lot of infrastructure projects. This has been going on, by the way, for the last couple of years. We have this big wave of building in the muni market.
Is there a theme among the issuance expected next year in terms of either the location, particular states, or the types of projects that are being financed?
Well, I know one thing, ever since the 2017 Tax Act took away advance refundings, we're seeing taxable advance refundings. So that's probably going to be a theme going forward. You might see, I think someone said $100 billion in taxable municipal bonds being sold, which means squeezing out or there's not enough tax-exempt bonds to go around to fill the holes in people's portfolios.
And the main buyers of taxable muni bonds, which seems like a contradiction, they're not the people who are looking to for some sort of tax relief, right? So who are these buyers?
that you bring this up is very interesting because we're seeing a lot of foreign participation in the market, and I have to believe we'll see more of that in the future. And, earlier this week we actually carried a story by Danielle Moran about a UK municipal bond market opening up. So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I'm wondering, especially given all of the news flow that we're getting today and the idea that potentially some sort of trade truce will allow for more U.S. economic growth. Could it lead to higher yields ahead in benchmark borrowing costs? Has there been any discussion about what that could mean and basically how problematic that could be with some of these forecasts if yields were to rise?
Right now, nobody in the muni market, and of course, I guess that's a problem there when everyone agrees. Nobody in the muni market is really talking about higher rates. Everybody's talking about lower rates. And, right now, what is it, 10-year? It's well below 1.5. Where are you going to go? Maybe 0.75 of a percentage point?
What's the relative valuation of muni bonds versus Treasury debt right now?
It's in the 80s.
No, I mean meaning like relative to history. In other words, are muni bonds relatively expensive relative to treasuries? Are they relatively cheap versus treasuries? What's the spread?
Right now, 50 to 100 basis points. How about that?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, it's pretty tight, right? Basically,
yeah,
there's been a pretty big rally. And just one other question: you did highlight a story about Trump's tax breaks and this hidden frenzy that corporate giants are trying to exploit. Can you explain?
Opportunity zones.
Oh, yes.
People in the muni market, bankers, are just starting to look at opportunity zones, thinking that there's, not only is the opportunity zone subsidy there for, investment in distressed localities, but it's also there for a variety of other places, including real estate.
And people are increasingly using this particular loophole, right?
Sure. I mean, it's taken them a while. I mean, I would say, it took people, a good 6-7 months before they are starting to get comfortable with exactly what they could do with this.
All right. Thank you so much. Joe Mysak, editor of the Bloomberg Brief, focused on the municipal bond market for Bloomberg News, joining us here in our interactive broker studios. I apologize, but it is all. It is all. You'll have to just come back next week, this time Friday. Right now, in markets, as they try to digest the news, they have found a direction. It is lower as we get all of these headlines when it comes to trade. The S&P now down 0.3%. What you have right now is the December 15th tariffs will not go into effect. That we have agreed upon on both sides, the U.S. and China. As to everything else, unclear. It seems like phase one is going to be a rollout in multiple stages, as Leland Miller was just saying, with potentially the U.S. rolling back some of the existing tariffs in return for China's compliance with certain promises. We'll have much more coming up. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Chinese officials said Beijing and Washington have agreed on the text of a Phase 1 trade deal, which will see the removal of tariffs on Chinese goods in stages. A swirl of headlines have whipsawed markets. Right now, stocks are little changed. The top U.S. aviation regulator is criticizing Boeing's chief executive. The FAA is, quote, concerned the plane maker is pressuring the agency on the 737 MAX. The deterioration in relations between the two sides will likely delay the jet's return to service. Ride-hailer Lyft is stepping up its challenge to traditional car rental companies, testing a new service in Los Angeles and San Francisco. The operation offers unlimited mileage as an inducement. And everyone wants to be the next Netflix with its 158 million customers worldwide. But only about a third of customers stick around after free trials run out. And roughly 10% of members quit video streaming services monthly, according to billing company Recurly. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
only you can prevent wildfires.
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscribe.
My name's Ian, and I run the Christmas Centres for Crisis. Many people in Britain are homeless, stuck in hostels, sleeping on floors, even on the street. You can change this. Our Christmas Centres provide people with food, safety and support, and show them how Crisis can help them find a home and a job in the year ahead. You can reserve a place at Crisis this Christmas for just £28.87. Go to crisis.org.uk now. Help someone take their first step out of homelessness this Christmas. Thank you.
You never know where life will take you, which is why the new BMW 3 Series Touring is perfect if you're all packed up for, or escaping to. It has extensive storage and an automatic tailgate, handy if your hands are full. And it even has an optional intelligent voice assistant to help you at every turn. The new BMW 3 Series Touring. Book your 24-hour test drive today. Test drive subject to status and availability. Participating retailers only.
Dear Dad, Merry Christmas. Thank you for always doing everything you could to make this time of year special for us. No one has a Christmas jumper collection quite like yours. Your festive spirit is...
Gingerbread latte with 2 shots and nutmeg whipped cream for Joe.
I hope it snows. I know how you love a white Christmas. All my love, Joe. Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app and get 20% off when you buy a card and gift this Christmas. Use code HEARTFELT20. Exclusions apply.
Ho, ho, ho. Who's made a list this year?
I want a new phone, one with amazing cameras, ultra-wide lens, of course, live focus video. Well, it has to be 5G ready to stream all my films. Can it come with something awesome to listen to them through?
Darling, I think he was talking to the kids.
Get everything you want and more. Purchase a Samsung 5G ready device and claim a pair of silver wireless Galaxy Buds at no extra cost. Shop our 5G handsets in store or online at your local Vodafone store or Vodafone.co.uk. 18 plus. Offer excludes Galaxy Fold 5G. Purchased by the 25th of the 12/19. Claim from Samsung within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Whether you call yourself a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or something else, the road to 2020 is on TuneIn.
What a night!
And a complete earthquake. This was
Follow every step of the Democratic primaries while hearing the latest headlines from the White House with live 24-hour news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News Talk, and more.
We're closing in on the first results in the battle for the White House.
Experience the election through the sources you trust with the nonstop news channels on TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we'll talk about some of the agricultural purchases that China may have agreed to make as part of the Phase 1 trade deal with the United States. States and talk about how that's going to affect corn and soy prices in particular. Plus, we have a conversation with Danny Blanchflower, professor of economics at Dartmouth, on the UK elections and the implications for the nation. Right now, though, let's head over to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
China and the U.S. agreed on the text of a Phase 1 trade deal, Lisa, that includes the removal of tariffs on Chinese goods in stages, according to China Vice Commerce Minister Wang Shouwen. This, as President Donald Trump confirmed that some levies will be reduced and said the next round of talks will start immediately. Meanwhile, in the UK, Boris Johnson won an emphatic election victory that redraws the political map of Britain and gives the Prime Minister the mandate he needs to pull the UK out of the European Union next month. On all of that news, initially investors smiled and stocks surged. Now, not so much. Ben Emmons, Medley Global Advisors, tells Bloomberg a lot of the headwinds for global markets should be off the table now.
The dynamics in the background were suggesting that ultimately the hard Brexit would be avoided and we would get a trade deal with China, but there was uncertainty about when, and I think that was taken out yesterday. So the euphoria across markets is not just that the tail risk is off the table.
The euphoria has faded as we check the stocks every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 0.3%, down 9. The Dow's down 0.3%, down 81. The NASDAQ is down 0.1%, down 11. The 10-year is up 20-30 seconds with a yield of 1.82%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up over 1% at 59.78 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 0.5% at 14.80 even per ounce. The dollar yen, 109.23. The euro, $1.11.24, and the British pound, $1.33.32. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. The following commentary is from...
We are broadcasting live from our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, and we have gotten news, just to reiterate the headlines, about China, that the U.S. has agreed not to implement the threatened December 15th tariffs. We also have some discussion of a trade deal that has been signed off on, at least by President Trump and Chinese negotiators. Exactly what that looks like, though, does remain to be seen. We are seeing corn and soy prices in particular rise on the heels of this. Michael Hertzer joining us now, an agricultural reporter for Bloomberg, joining us from Chicago. Michael, can you first just give us a sense of what the impact of the trade skirmish between the U.S. and China has had on the agricultural sector over the past 2 years?
Sure. So, exports to China, one of the top markets in the world, have plunged from the U.S. They've started to recover a bit as the two sides have, had various bouts at the negotiating table, but still remain below levels, seen as recently as 2017. And farmers are struggling with prices. Prices have gotten a little better, but there's still more supply than there is demand, and they really want China to come back.
What do we know so far about the agricultural component of the trade deal that appears to be struck between the U.S. and China?
At the press conference that they just held, 11 p.m. in Beijing, they said they would notably increase imports, and that's kind of all we have. They did say they want to keep things on WTO rules and make purchases as the market dictates, which traders kind of took that as China kind of continuing to buy as best suits them, which could be from the U.S., it could be from Brazil, as far as soybeans go. So the details remain elusive, and China did not confirm sort of reports of commitments of as many as $50 billion of imports in 2020, and people were really hoping for that.
All right, so what are some of the questions now that remain?
Basically, can they import $50 billion worth of U.S. ag goods? Is that even possible? Back in 2017, they imported about $20 billion. So this would be kind of more than double pre-trade war levels. And you could look at Hong Kong, and that's maybe another $4 billion or so. And even if you add those together, getting to that $50 billion number, even if China has committed to that, is still just kind of a major question mark.
One thing that I was struck by in the Beijing press conference by Chinese trade negotiators, they were saying that they're trying to develop their own internal agricultural and poultry, for example, exports. And they were talking about exporting poultry. Is that going to be part of this, that basically they want to develop their products as well on this side and are trying trying to promote that, or is this just a messaging issue?
That is there's sort of a tit for tat on the poultry. They allowed for some, I believe it's prepared Chinese poultry products to come into the U.S. in exchange for reopening the Chinese market to U.S. poultry. So I think people think there might be some prepared products that would come back into the U.S.
How good do you think this deal will be for farmers across America? I mean, do you think that this sort of certainty and China coming back into the market will stave off some of the increase in bankruptcies that we've seen in the upper Midwest?
I think that, it still really remains to be seen. The fact that China was, up late on Friday having a press conference and publicly saying that, phase one has been reached is great news for farmers, but now kind of getting down to the brass tacks of how this is all going to play out. It should be good. How good is kind of the question.
And can you give us a sense of where we are in the shakeout? Because there have been bankruptcies that have been with an increasing pace in the upper Midwest. And this doesn't just have to do with trade skirmishes. This has to do with the price of grain and a whole host of other issues as well. Where are we in that shakeout?
Yeah, so, the U.S. government has doled out, I think $24 billion in aid payments as these trade disputes have gone on, which has helped with farmer finances. But this could be sort of a reckoning in the next 6 months to a year as this stuff really starts to play out, and farmers need things to get better to kind of smooth out a few down years on finances. It's getting to be, credit conditions are maybe improving slightly for farmers, but they're very stressed and they need some help.
Michael Hertzer, thank you so much for being with us. Michael Hertzer, agricultural reporter for Bloomberg News, joining us from Chicago. Just to give you a sense of the markets today on this wild news dump of a Friday the 13th, we're seeing the S&P down 0.2%, the Dow down a similar amount, whereas the NASDAQ pretty flat, actually still managing to get just slightly into the green. Traders trying to assess, is this just buy the rumor, sell the news, or is this ongoing uncertainty with perhaps, yes, we're not going to get the December 15th tariffs, but phase one is going to be rolled out in a series of steps that remain to be seen, leaving a lot of uncertainty. You're seeing Treasury yields heading lower, and that comes after a disappointing retail sales figure earlier. And you are seeing the British pound at one point having its best day in 3 years after a decisive election for Boris Johnson becoming the victor with a decisive majority, guaranteeing Brexit next month. Right now, let's head to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C., where we catch up on the rest of the news, which is the impeachment and more. Nathan Hager.
Indeed, Lisa. Thank you. Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee stuck together to vote impeachment of President Trump. So did Republicans in their no votes. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports from Capitol Hill.
The meeting was short, just long enough to pass the two articles by party line 23 to 17 votes. The statement afterward by Chairman Jerry Nadler was also short.
Today is a solemn and sad day. For the third time in a little over a century and a half, the House Judiciary Committee has voted articles of impeachment against the president for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The House will act expeditiously.
Republicans rushed to the microphones to charge once again that the procedures were unfair, the case was thin, the president was right not to cooperate. On Capitol Hill, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Meantime, President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani's been spotted at the White House today. The president had asked his lawyer to brief Republican senators and the Justice Department about information he collected on a visit to Ukraine last week. In New Zealand, 6 more bodies have been recovered from White Island volcano. More from Bloomberg's Matthew Brockett.
The operation to retrieve bodies from White Island was conducted by members of the bomb disposal squad wearing specialist clothing and breathing equipment. 2 further bodies thought to still be on the island remain to be found. There were 47 people on the volcano when it erupted Monday in an explosion of scorching steam, gas and ash. Most sustained severe burns. 16 have died, and of the 31 survivors, 28 are in hospitals in New Zealand and Australia, many in a critical condition. In Wellington, Matthew Brockett, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Christmas, a time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Some days life can get in the way of catching up on the news that moves your world. TuneIn is here to help. With live 24/7 coverage from CNN wherever you go on the TuneIn app, you can always find a slice of your schedule, however long, to check in on the biggest stories of the day.
Hell hath no fury. The president's counselor went on a rampage on a taped phone call with Washington Examiner reporter.
Search CNN on TuneIn to get the live news when it matters most.
On the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Petrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. Don't want to miss a second of your NFL team's next matchup? Let TuneIn remind you. Just make sure notifications are enabled on your phone and search for your team profile on the TuneIn app. Then, find the game you want under events and tap Notify Me. We'll send you an alert as soon as live coverage begins.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie.
With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
From ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
How will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 Podcasts, Season 6. Listen in favorite 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
Far wing, elevates, triple bucket.
The roar of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut it.
The sideline, the Van Fleet for 3.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now. Hear it live on TuneIn.
Fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on the
Search
right.
NBA today to start listening.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks falter just a day after hitting fresh records and after a morning surge. Some of the initial shine about a Phase 1 trade pact between the U.S. and China seems to be wearing off. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's down 0.1%, down 4. The Dow's down 0.1%, down 33, and the Nasdaq's up 0.1%, up 8. The 10-year is up 20-30 seconds. The yield is 1.82%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 1.1%. COMEX gold is up 0.6% at $14.8160 an ounce. The dollar yen 109.24. The euro $1.1130, and the British pound $1.3341. Oracle is slumping after the company's quarterly sales trailed expectations. Analysts say the forecast suggests a sharp growth acceleration in the fiscal fourth quarter is needed to meet the company's year-end target. Right now, Oracle is down 2.8%. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We've been talking a lot about trade and the idea that the U.S. and China have come to some sort of agreement, but we can't let that overshadow the incredible victory of Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom overnight. If you take a look, with all seats declared, the Conservatives had won 365 of the 650 seats in the House of Commons. That is a gain of 48 to Labour's 203 seats, which is down 59, a massive win, possibly the most since the 1930s. Joining us now, Professor Danny Blanchflower. He's professor of economics at Dartmouth College. He's in Geneva. What are you doing in Geneva, Danny?
Well, interesting days. I'm actually in Geneva. I gave a keynote at a big conference here on full employment, sort of relevant to what's going on around the world and relevant to what's happened in the UK, where basically lots of people are hurting. And I'm just looking at the list of seats that the Labour Party lost in the traditional Labour heartland: Burnley, Birmingham, Derby, and Glasgow, all around the country, Newcastle-under-Lyme, Peterborough, Scunthorpe. I mean, this is a devastating defeat, and I think really driven by, on the doorstep, that the election in the end didn't come down to Brexit. It came down to the leader of the Labour Party, who people saw as unelectable and had nothing to offer them. So I think it's very interesting. And the other point is that the polls, the opinion polls, which have been bad in the past, got it absolutely spot on.
Okay, so I guess that is the takeaway here that UK citizens are just sick of Brexit discussions, just want it done, or is the takeaway really that Brexit was sort of the backdrop issue, and that it was a lot of other things that took the fore that really drove Boris Johnson to victory?
Well, I think it was that. I mean, the message in a way was, if you think of the Trump message, make America great again. And Boris's message was get Brexit done And nobody had the faintest clue what Jeremy Corbyn's view on Brexit was, the biggest issue in 50 years in Britain. And he said, well, I'll wait and I'll think about it later, because everyone knew that he was against it. And one of the big things that also happened was that he had the issues of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And the week before the election, he was asked on one interview 4 times, would he condemn anti-Semitism? And he wouldn't. I mean, how in goodness only name you wouldn't condemn anti-Semitism, but he didn't, and that had a huge electoral effect. So I think it was that Boris had a simple message, wanted to get things done, and the opposition just looked clueless. And the interesting thing in a way was that the economic package that Labour was giving was probably the most sensible. Spending on the NHS, infrastructure spending, and actually some renationalisations that were hugely popular. But that wasn't the message that came through. And on the doorstep, it turned out that Brexit was kind of third. It was about, this is not a credible opposition. I'm scared to death of having somebody like Jeremy Corbyn in there. And the other one is that the leader of the third party lost her seat. And so she resigned from the third party. So this is the worst thing, the worst defeat for Labour since 1935. How Jeremy Corbyn has not resigned, I don't know. I mean, I was on his advisory panel in 2016, along with Piketty and Joe Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize winner, and we all bailed out when we realized very quickly that this was a disaster in the making.
Yeah,
and he had nothing to offer. And so it's a combination of things, and I think the take home, in a sense, for the United States is that populist leaders with simple messages which appeal to people who are hurting and don't really explain in full detail what they're going to do is electorally popular. It's what we saw in 2016. It may well be what we'll see in 2020. And Trump is going to take this as an indicator that maybe, if he goes along with this kind of message, he's going to go get reelected.
So given your political experience and given your experience on the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee as a member, can you give us a sense of what the victory means for the economy, what you expect going forward for the United Kingdom?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is that at least it settles the uncertainty. Markets know what's coming. We've seen a surge in the stock market. We've seen home builders, utilities pushing forward. We've seen a gain in the pound. But my suspicion is that the MPC at this meeting next week may seriously consider doing a rate cut because the uncertainty is sort of being resolved. But the economy is sitting in the doldrums. And the last meeting, there were 2 dissenters looking for a cut. So the reality is that the Bank of England is the only show in town right now. I mean, we'll get a new Chancellor of the Exchequer, and maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks, you and I will be talking about the appointment of a new governor that Boris is going to make. My suspicion is he might appoint my old college roommate, Jerry Lyons, who was his chief economist in London. He and I were grad students together.
Wait, hold on a second.
So that's what he may well do. But
whoa. You were roommates. You're not getting away with that, with saying that you were roommates. What was he like as a roommate?
Well, I mean, when I say a roommate, he was actually my office mate. We didn't share digs, but we worked together. I mean, he's got, so let's get this clear, right? I mean, the answer is, a very well-trained economist, got a PhD in economics and macro, got very well experienced in the city of London, earned a lot of money, worked as an economist for Boris Johnson when he was the mayor, and has been strongly pro-Brexit. I mean, he and I have disagreed on that, but you would certainly call him a credible, trained economist. He's been very kind of pro-green, pretty strong on boosting the economy, and might well result in some move to the centre. But my suspicion is now Boris can do whatever Boris likes, and I think Jerry Lyons now goes to the top of the heap. I mean, he's a smart, good guy.
Yeah.
Basically. I disagree with, but would you say to me, would he be a good appointment? I would say, yeah, I could work with the guy.
All right, just 1 minute here. I'm just wondering, going forward, people are saying that business confidence is going to be unleashed and people will spend again. Is that accurate given the uncertainties that remain with an actual trade deal with the UK and the EU?
Well, it's a really great question. I mean, obviously, the thing we've talked about is get Brexit done. And you say, okay, we're going to do this in January, but Macron immediately came out today and said, well, okay, now the real business starts. What are you going to do? Are you going to negotiate a deal with us? Are you going to, instead of just coming out with dreamland stuff, are you going to seriously negotiate with us and compromise So I think that's what happens. And then, of course, what happens is you go into a long transition period. You need to resolve the issues in Ireland. He's certainly going to be faced with the prospect of losing Scotland. I mean, the SNP basically swept the board in Scotland. They're going to ask for a second referendum. They're actually going to say, we want to leave the UK and go back to the EU. So there are going to be all these kinds of issues. In a sense, this is you win this thing and you say everything's easy, and now the hard stuff starts. So I think, Macron has immediately gone in and said, so what's your negotiating position? You can't make up this stuff. You've actually got to sit at the table with us, and you can't cherry pick. You can't cherry pick a little bit that you like. If you want to do that, it's a no-deal Brexit disaster.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. I could speak with you all day. Danny Blanchflower, professor of economics at Dartmouth College. Thank you for joining us and giving us that fantastic perspective from Geneva. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, my co-host and colleague Paul Sweeney off today. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local list.
Dear Dad, Merry Christmas. Thank you for always doing everything you could to make this time of year special for us. No one has a Christmas jumper collection quite like yours. Your festive spirit...
Gingerbread latte with 2 shots and nutmeg whipped cream for Joe.
Hope it snows. I know how you love a white Christmas. All my love, Joe. Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app and get 20% off when you buy a card and gift this Christmas. Use code Heartfelt20. Exclusions apply.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Bayless. Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Whether you call yourself a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or something else, the road to 2020 is on TuneIn.
What a night!
And a complete earthquake. This was
Follow every step of the Democratic primaries while hearing the latest headlines from the White House with live 24-hour news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News Talk, and more.
We're closing in on the first results in the battle for the White House.
Experience the election through the sources you trust with the nonstop news channels on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
The financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, I'm David Weston. Welcome now to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. The big story of the day, at least one of them, is trade. The United States and China have agreed to a Phase 1 trade deal. President Trump says the Chinese have agreed to structural changes in agricultural purchases. China says the United States will be rolling back tariffs, at least in stages or phases. Here to take us through it all is Sean Donnan of Bloomberg News. You're the person I want to talk to, Sean, because the more I've heard about this, the less I understand it. Exactly what do we think they have agreed and haven't they agreed?
Well, they have nailed down the text, and it's now going to the lawyers, and that deal calls for 4 big elements. The first of them is a big ramping up of Chinese agricultural purchases. Before the trade wars, they were buying about $20 billion a year. President Trump saying he expects that to hit as much as $50 billion a year. The Chinese putting a bit of a caveat on that, saying that will have to be under WTO rules, and of course, if markets allow. So there's some questions there. The second big element here is some commitments from the Chinese on a few structural changes. Intellectual property enforcement, they're going to do more of it, they say. That's something they're doing already. The third big element is something on currency. The Chinese have long been accused of being a currency manipulator. In this agreement, they agreed to be more transparent about how they manage their currency. We'll see what happens there. And the fourth element, and this may be the biggest for the U.S. economy, and it comes from the U.S. side, is that President Trump has agreed not to go ahead with tariffs on $160 billion in imports from China that were due to go into effect on Sunday. He has also agreed to lower the rate on about $110 billion in imports from China that took effect September 1. That'll go down from 15 to 7.5% immediately. Those are all big carrots for the Chinese. This is really the first time we've seen President Trump, who has called himself tariff man, roll back any tariffs, and that's a pretty big confidence-building measure here. The big problem with this agreement, and we're already seeing folks point to it, including Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, and that is that this does not address some of the big, long-standing American complaints about the Chinese economy, and that is things like industrial subsidies. President Trump says the tariffs that are still in place will give him the leverage for a phase 2 of the negotiations, but we don't know when that phase 2 is going to start, and we have a lot of folks telling us that they don't expect that phase 2 to conclude any time before the 2020 election.
Well, and that is the question, certainly when you get to politics. Are we going to be going into a presidential election where we're daily getting tweets up and down about what's going on with the Chinese? We've had it now for well over a year. Is this going to keep going through the election?
Yeah, I think we should expect these phase 2 negotiations, and there may even be a phase 3 to go on over the next year. I mean, in some ways, what this allows President Trump to do is to say, hey, my tariffs worked, I got a deal. He's also reducing some of the harm caused by his trade wars by getting the Chinese to again buy agricultural goods from U.S. farmers who got hit hard here, and those farmers are in states that he needs for re-election. And at the same time, he gets to address the China hawks by saying, I'm not done yet. I've still got tariffs in place, and there's more negotiating I'm doing. The Chinese are going to have to give more.
Sean, come back to the issue that was so important the Chinese said is a rollback on tariffs. As you said, we're not going to get the new tariffs December 15. We're going to roll back the ones from September 1 to 7.5%, not to 0 to 7.5%. When the Chinese say there will be phases in which we'll be rolling back tariffs, does that go beyond the September 1 tariffs?
Yeah, that's unclear right now. That's something that we're trying to nail down here in the U.S. We have not heard that from the U.S. side, but the Chinese very clearly today indicated that they expect more tariffs to come off.
At the same time, the Chinese also in that news conference over in Beijing seem to sidestep the question of exactly how much agricultural their projects are going to be buying. Do they buy them irrespective of whether they're cheaper or more expensive than, for example, soybeans from Brazil or Argentina?
Well, that's a big question going forward. We know that the Chinese throughout these talks have been reluctant to commit to a specific number. You saw a sign of that. Part of the question is that they can't go.
Sean, I'm going to interrupt you. The only one person in the world I'd interrupt you for, and that's the President of the United States. Let's listen to what he said a short time ago.
Big untapped market of 1.5 billion people. And so I was actually doing the finals, but I got to see enough of it. And certainly I spoke to my people. It's a witch hunt. It's a sham. It's a hoax. Nothing was done wrong. Zero was done wrong. I think it's a horrible thing to be using the tool of impeachment, which is supposed to be used in an emergency, and it would seem many, many, many years apart, to be using this for a perfect phone call where the president of that country said there was no pressure whatsoever, didn't even know what we were talking about. It was perfect. The relationship is perfect. I've done much more for them than Obama did for them. It's a scam. It's something that shouldn't be allowed. and it's a very bad thing for our country, and you're trivializing impeachment. And I tell you what, someday there'll be a Democrat president and there'll be a Republican House, and I suspect they're going to remember it. Because when you use impeachment for absolutely nothing other than to try and get political gain. Now, with that being said, my poll numbers, as you know, have gone through the roof. Fundraising for the Republican Party has gone through the roof. We're setting records. Nobody's ever seen anything like it, because the people are disgusted. The people are absolutely disgusted. Nobody's ever seen anything like this. And I watched yesterday, I got to see quite a bit of it yesterday, and I watched these Democrats on the committee make fools out of themselves. Absolute fools out of themselves. And I also saw them quoting all the time incorrectly. They kept saying me. It wasn't about me, it was about us. The word was us. So they kept saying me. It said us. Can you do us a favor? Our country, comma, our country. Then it talked about seeing the Attorney General of the United States. For these people to say me, they would say me. You said, do me a favor. No, it didn't say that. It said, do us a favor, our country. Talking about the past election, talking about corruption. The other thing nobody remembers and nobody likes to talk about, and I talk about it all the time, is why isn't Germany, why isn't France, why aren't other European countries paying? Because we're paying the suckers. You know, for years we've been the suckers, but we're not the suckers anymore. Big difference. But why isn't Germany paying big money? They're the ones, I mean, they have a much bigger benefit than we do, because Ukraine is really a stoppage between Russia and parts of Europe, the major part of Europe. Why aren't European countries paying? Why isn't France paying a lot of money? Why is it always the United States? We're 7,000 miles away. Why is it always the suckers that pay? So we've changed that, but nobody brings that up. I think that the whole impeachment thing, hoax, I guess you could call it, because it is a hoax, and Nancy Pelosi knows it. By the way, they duped her yesterday. She was on an interview, and she said, we've been working on this for 2.5 years. So she was working on it, in other words, 2 years before we ever spoke to Ukraine. She said, we've been working on impeachment for 2.5 years. And the reporter was shocked when they got this answer, because it showed she's a liar. So it's a very sad thing for our country, but it seems to be very good for me politically. And again, those people, because I watch some of the dishonest fake media, they're saying, well, the polls have remained the same. No, the polls have not remained the same. I think you understand that, John. The polls have gone through the roof for Trump, because people, especially with independent voters, and especially in swing states, I could show you numbers that nobody has ever seen numbers like this before. So the impeachment is a hoax. It's a sham. It started a long time ago, probably before I came down the escalator with the future First Lady. It started a long time ago. And when you look at the IG report and you look at these horrible FBI people talking about we got to get them out, insurance policies, you know, the insurance policies, just in case she loses, meaning Crooked Hillary, who's crooked as a $3 bill. Just in case Crooked Hillary loses, we've got an insurance policy. Well, we've been going through the insurance policy now for 3 years, and it's a disgrace. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Say it. I think they'll hit $50 billion in agriculture. No, much more than 50, because it's also manufacturing and other. But I think in agriculture they will hit $50 billion.
Next year, or when? What's
pretty soon. They've already stepped it up. My deal with them was 2 months ago. We had it in pretty good form. I said, do me a favor, start buying agriculture. And they started. If you look, I mean, they're already buying. Even before the deal is signed, they're buying.
Do you prefer a short?
Well, we're with the people of Venezuela 100%. It's so important to us, and we're going to be discussing Venezuela today. It'll be a big subject.
Mr. President, do you prefer a short process in the Senate or a more extended process?
Well, I've heard Lindsey Graham, who's terrific, and I heard his statement, and I like that. And I'll do whatever I want. Look, we did nothing wrong. So I'll do long or short. I've heard Mitch. I've heard Lindsay. I think they are very much on agreement on some concept. I'll do whatever they want to do. It doesn't matter. I wouldn't mind a long process because I'd like to see the whistleblower who's a fraud. The whistleblower wrote a false report. And I really blew it up when I released the transcript of the call. And then Schiff gets up, and I blew him up too, because he went up in front of Congress, and he made a statement about what I said that was totally false. And then a long time after he made it, when he got caught, he said, that was parody. No, Schiff is a crooked, he's a corrupt politician, and a disgrace. And because of the fact he's in Congress, he's got immunity, so you can't do anything. But he went up there, you know that, he made a totally false statement. The whistleblower wrote a totally false statement. So it's a fraud. Then I say, where is the informer, the one that informed the whistleblower? You had an informer. He disappeared. You know why he disappeared? Because I released the transcript. Had I not released that transcript, we would have had an informer. We would have had another whistleblower. By the way, where's the second whistleblower? Remember that? We have a second whistleblower. We have breaking news. Look, not all of it, but much of the media is corrupt. These are bad people, they're sick people, and they're corrupt. And we're fighting the Democrats, and we're fighting a lot of the corrupt media. But I asked the corrupt media, where's the second whistleblower? Now, had I not had a transcript, I'm lucky we had this transcript, which, by the way, has now been verified by the Lieutenant Colonel, okay? He's another beauty. So where is all of the stuff that was going to happen? Once I released it, and I released it quickly, but once I released it, the second whistleblower disappeared. The first whistleblower, who was all set to testify, he all of a sudden he becomes this saint-like figure that they don't need him anymore. The one that everybody wanted to see, including Schiff, was the whistleblower. Once I released the text of what happened, the transcript, that was the end. Everybody disappeared. So now there's no informer. There's no second whistleblower. Everybody's gone. And by the way, a guy like Sundlun, nobody ever saw. He said very strongly that I said I want nothing and no quid pro quo. Nobody says that. That's what he said. He said it in Congress. Nobody ever says that. So look, we're dealing with a lot of corrupt people. There was nothing done wrong. To use the power of impeachment on this nonsense is an embarrassment to this country. The president just said it. It's an embarrassment to our country. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Let's go.
I think that the whole impeachment thing, hoax, I guess you could call it, because it is a hoax, and Nancy Pelosi knows it. By the way, they duped her yesterday. She was on an interview, and she said, we've been working on this for 2.5 years.
Okay, we've been listening to a playback of what President Trump said in the Oval Office a short time ago. He's actually having a visit from the president of Paraguay. That didn't come up in what we heard there. You heard he spent an awful lot of time on his view about the impeachment proceedings up on the Hill. We'll come back to that later on in the program, calling it a farce and a hoax. But in there was a kernel about trade. And for that, we want to go back to Sean Donnan now, who's been patiently waiting for us in Washington. So, Sean, he did say we're going to get to $50 billion, as I understood it, in agriculture alone, manufacturing beyond that, and we'll do it fairly soon. When we finally see the language, will it specify, in your opinion, will it specify when we get to that number? And what about those WTO restrictions and market conditions that you referred to before we heard from the president?
Well, look, you're asking all the right questions there, and we don't have answers to them right now. We know that we're going to get this text that hopefully will give us more detail on what's there. But I think what we're really seeing here from the president is how he is consumed by some of the other news here in Washington right now.
Okay, thank you so much, Sean, for being with us and for your patience today. That's Bloomberg's Sean Donnan, who covers trade for us in Washington. Now we want to turn from trade to that other big story today. That is, of course, the British elections. Boris Johnson and his Conservative Party yesterday won its biggest majority since the days of Maggie Thatcher. Welcome now from Washington, Heather Conley. She's director of the Europe program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. So once again, thank you for your patience, Heather. Let's get to this British election. And this is obviously a massive victory, as I say, an historic victory in many respects. Why did Boris Johnson and the Conservatives do so well? Was it Brexit, or was it the underlying merits of the policies being exposed?
Well, I think in some ways Boris Johnson implemented the keep it simple, stupid theme of just keep it focused on getting Brexit done. It was simple. It was focused. He tried to stay out of controversy. He was very uncharacteristically disciplined in his approach. And it was very clear it was a winning message. I think the other part of the story is the deep, deep unpopularity of Jeremy Corbyn, which also played through in the exit polling data. So you're absolutely right. A historic vote where we were seeing constituencies that have been in Labour's hands for generations turn for the very first time towards the Conservative Party. And so now this domination of the Conservative Party, as I like to always use Colin Powell's phrase, the Pottery Barn rule, you break it, you own it. Well, the Conservative Party has certainly will bring the UK out of the EU, but now they're going to own that process. There's no parliament to blame. Their dominance gives them a lot of ownership of what comes next.
And the question of what comes next, they can get out. The question is, what are the relationships with Europe after they get out? Do we have any indication of what Boris Johnson's likely to do? Is he likely to go the way of Norway and have rules that are very similar to Europe, so they have really strong trading relationships? Or might he actually risk, I think, the UK economy by really having a more clean break?
So this is absolutely the question, because we have no idea what leader Boris Johnson is going to be. Is he going to be sort of that mayor of London, that liberal centrist who, as he said today, wants a very close partnership with Europe after the UK leaves? Or is he the Boris Johnson that was prime minister for the last 5 months, calling for great divergence from the EU, wanting to be a Singapore on Thames, wanting to compete with the EU across the board? And so we simply don't know. With this majority, he can do all, different things that he wants to, but we know the clock is running. So they basically have 11 months to conclude this free trade agreement with the EU, unless Mr. Johnson asks for an extension by the July 1st, and he's told us on the campaign trail he won't do it, but we know that he changes his mind, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, something about dead in a ditch, as I recall. Okay, thank you so much to Heather Conley. She is Senior Vice President and Director of the Europe Program at CSIS down in Washington. Coming up here, it's official. Impeachment is heading to a floor vote in the House next week, with a Senate trial looking set for January. We ask our political panel what it all means. That's next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Rich, so do you really think your party's manifesto is plausible, or is it just an election bribe?
Get an in-depth look at all the main party manifestos. From public services to immigration, the Times and the Sunday Times will guide you through. Pick up your copy today or visit thetimes.co.uk.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
How will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 Podcasts, Season 6. Listen in favorite 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellet, brought to you by the all-new gas-powered Sprinter from Mercedes-Benz. Major League Baseball will start testing for opioids and cocaine, but only players who do not cooperate with their treatment plans will be subject to discipline. Marijuana will now be treated the same as alcohol as part of changes announced to the joint drug agreement between MLB and the Players Association. In addition, suspensions for marijuana use will be dropped from the minor league drug program. South Korea has withdrawn from the bidding to host the 2023 Women's World Cup. The Korea Football Association said it initially pushed to jointly host the games with North Korea, but strained relations failed to realize a unified bid. South Korea co-hosted the 2002 Men's World Cup with Japan. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellet.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. The House Judiciary Committee passed 2 articles of impeachment on a party line vote earlier today, advancing them to the full House for a vote next week. Welcome now our political panel. From Washington, Joel Payne. He's former senior advisor to the Hillary Clinton 2016 presidential campaign. And from Austin, Jason Johnson. He is former chief advisor to the Ted Cruz 2016 presidential campaign. So welcome to both of you. Good to have you here. We just heard at some from the president. Jason, I can start with you on this, about what he saw yesterday, the way he described it. He called it a farce, a hoax with respect to impeachment. He said they misquoted him, and in fact, they've been planning on this for some good time. Is that basically his defense, insofar as he needs a defense, and it goes to trial?
Yeah, I believe it is. I mean, if we step back and really set the partisan rhetoric aside, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, the reality is that it was the worst kept secret in Washington, D.C., that pretty much from day one, at least some in the Democrat Party wanted to impeach this president. And so it's been going on a long time. And unfortunately, it has become simply a partisan affair. We know that the vote to open the inquiry into impeachment was partisan in favor and bipartisan against. And we assume go forward with the next vote on the articles of impeachment in the House, the vote will be the same. And so I think that this president and Republicans at large, and if you look at polling data, when you set the partisans on the right and left aside, the reality is independents have turned against this process because it has been so partisan. And really, it should feel historic, but it doesn't, because it's not historic when you know it's coming.
Right. So Joel, what about it? This reminds me a little bit of the Clinton impeachment, where basically the Democrats then were saying it's a vast right-wing conspiracy. You've been after the president, and they had a point. They've been after the president, but so that's not entirely surprising. The question is, isn't it, whether the president did anything he should not have done?
Yeah, and I mean, look, the only thing historic about it is the levels of support, which are historically high for this type of action. I mean, you look at Clinton and the Clinton impeachment, the country was about 15 to 20 points behind where it is right now in terms of what they think Congress should do, whether they think Congress should move forward with the inquiry and actually impeach the president or not. And I think it's interesting the framing that Jason puts on it when he talks about how this is a partisan affair, when all of the witnesses that Adam Schiff put in front of his Intelligence Committee, those are all Republican appointees. This is not the advisory board of the Democratic National Committee. These aren't my buddies on a text chain, me as part of the professional left, right? These are career Republicans. These are career officials. These are members of our national security apparatus who raised a lot of alarms about the president's behavior. And that's the part that I think Republicans don't want to talk about. And ultimately, that's why the American public is historically supporting impeachment at levels that we haven't seen before.
So Jason, how long should this take, the trial in the Senate? We're assuming now it's going to happen, at least. And we're hearing there's a tension between Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate, and the White House on how long it should take. We talked to Senator Kramer yesterday from North Dakota, and this is what he said on the subject.
I
I don't think we ought to aim for a big, long trial. As much fun as it might be to call witnesses that provide exculpatory evidence and testimony for our president, we could hear their evidence and we could hear the rebuttal by the president's lawyers, I think, and go right to a vote on both articles.
So Jason, if Mitch McConnell has the votes and he thinks he does have the vote, isn't there something you said for just getting the vote taken before something else might develop? You never know what's around the corner.
Certainly, there is. I mean, in reality, if politics were not involved, given the way this is developed in the House, coming to the Senate, giving, again, regardless of what you think about the matter, the votes are very predictable in the Senate. You would just get it out of the way. But I do believe there is a difference of opinion, which is all driven by different views of politics about what, I mean, this is a PR battle. Let's be real. That's what most of this has been about with this trial, quote unquote, on TV in the House. And so there definitely are a lot of Republicans that believe that there should be given ample time in the Senate and that will help the president and help Republicans to expose the view that this was all a sham from day one.
Okay, many thanks to Joel Payne in Washington. Sorry, Joel, I wanted one more to you, but I just ran out of time, my fault. And also to Jason Johnson down in Austin, Texas. Up next, it's a big day for U.S.-China trade relations, even if we don't yet know just how big it may be or exactly what the parties have agreed to. We're going to talk with Carla Hills, the person we most would want to talk about today, and that is former United States Trade Representative. And she was a trade representative under George Herbert Walker Bush. We're going to ask her views on where things stand with China and what comes next. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Stocks have been all over the place, depending on the trade news of the hour so far today. And now the U.S. and China say they've agreed to some aspects of a deal to roll back tariffs. The Dow is down 13 points to 28,119. The Nasdaq's up 15. The S&P 500 is down 1. It's a mixed start to the holiday shopping season. The government's monthly report on retail sales missed Wall Street estimates. The official data shows sales increased a mere 0.2% in November. Clothing retailers and restaurants were weak. Online sales were strong. Think of all the video streaming services that are available now. Disney Plus and Apple have joined Netflix, CBS, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and Comcast and AT&T are on the way. But billing service Recurly says streamers have some of the highest cancellation rates out there. Only about a third of customers stick around after the free trials run out. Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change